Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Biology Bios. My name is Jim Edelman. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at the University of Memphis, and my purpose with this podcast is really twofold. First, I want to let folks know that most Thursdays during the semester, we have talks by visiting researchers at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall. And that's folks from all over the country and world talking about the really cool biological research that they do. The second purpose is to have those folks here learn a little bit more about them, how they got where they are, and what really excites them about the research they do. In addition, I'd like to say a quick disclaimer that I borrowed these questions from Rhett Miller's excellent podcast called Wheels Off, so please check that out as well. But without further ado, let's get to this week's guest. Thanks so much for being here. Okay, well, Matthew Pollard, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Biology Bios.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really excited.
So I'm kind of going to preface this because I'm excited about this. You're a graduate student in the department here at University of Memphis. You're about to defend your dissertation next week.
Yeah, 6 long years, and I'm finally going to defend. So
brilliant.
It's over.
I'm excited because we have people that are further along in careers as professors that on here all the time, but we haven't had somebody that's at your stage, which I think is going to offer some different advice, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, when you suggested that we do this, I thought it was a good idea. Not just graduate students are listening, but also if you're getting any undergraduates listening, then it's going to be super important for them to hear from the next stage in their career and what they had to say.
And all the stuff that us professors have forgotten and look back on with rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
Hopefully your glasses are not terribly rose-colored yet.
They're not, no.
Well, let's start in where we generally do, and just kind of a quick intro to who you are, what your interests are, sort of your elevator pitch, if you would.
Cool. Yeah, so we already mentioned I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of Memphis. I'm in the Puckett Lab. I think I consider myself broadly somebody interested in trait evolution, but that's a super broad term. That's probably all I want to commit to, though, is I'm interested in trait evolution. And for most of my research for the dissertation, I've been focusing on the evolution of diet in mammals. So a macroevolutionary study to look at how diet evolved, when and where diet changed in the mammalian phylogeny, and how that affects how mammals speciate. I then also did a comparative genomic study of diet evolution in mammals to find out what parts of the genome are important as mammals become more carnivorous or herbivorous. And then a complete change of direction, which I don't think I've really told anyone in the department, it's going to be a surprise when I defend, is I did a final study looking at the evolution of different traits in bears.
Oh, sweet. Excellent. Yeah, no, that is a surprise.
Yeah. It was not a planned surprise. It was a surprise for everyone.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so I guess with that, and maybe that's where to jump in is one of those things that you're currently working on, particularly exciting. Do you want to kind of delve into it a little bit more, and why are you excited about it?
So yes, I do want to do that, and up until yesterday, the answer would have been the bear stuff, because that's the new stuff, and there are still a whole bunch of unanswered questions that I have to do some other things to figure out. But as of yesterday, the manuscript for the comparative genomic analysis of diet got accepted. And so now I'm excited about that.
Sweet. Congratulations, man.
Thank you. It's my first author paper. A long time coming, but
brilliant. No, that's great.
It happened, and I'm happy. Yeah,
that's exciting. Oh man, so you've got do you have minor things to edit and send off again, or
it was a little strange. So it's been 3 submissions with feedback about technical issues, and we fixed those, and some of them were things that weren't really in my control, and we actually had to go to the developers of the program to figure it out, which was kind of vindicating because it means that, it wasn't my fault, it was the program.
Right.
No, it wasn't the program, but yeah. This last one was just great. You've done all the science correctly, but you haven't quite interpreted it as you should have. Please try again. And we tried again. And the very next day, they said, great, accepted. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, with no information on minor edits or anything like that. Maybe that'll come later. I don't know.
You probably get some proofs with like, make sure that all of the type setting is right. And, that sort of thing. Yeah. No, that's super exciting. So okay. So what's the big take home from that one?
So, let's see. So I'm not the first person to try and look at what parts of the genome are important as diet evolves in mammals, but I am the first person to try and treat diet as a continuous variable. So you're not just a herbivore, you're not just a carnivore, you're not just an omnivore. Every mammal eats a different amount of animal protein and plant matter. And so it's a spectrum. And if you try and represent it like that in an analysis, you're going to get more power to detect things that you otherwise wouldn't normally.
Yeah.
And another thing that makes the study different is I looked at a lot more species than most people usually do, and they're across all of mammals with all these different kinds of diets. And the method that we used is able to combine the continuous dietary variable and all of these species to find some things that other people haven't found before, but also confirm some things as well, which is good. And the main takeaway is that it looks like liver and kidney functions are super important for changes in diet. We previously thought maybe they're really important for carnivorous diets. It turns out they're just super unimportant for herbivorous diets. Yeah. And just if you eat any amount of animal matter, these functions are going to be important. The moment you start not eating animals, those functions become less important. And that's why we're getting that result at the end.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I imagine you see like do you see a lot of variation then in the maybe strictly herbivorous or really towards the herbivorous side, that like maybe some of them have some of these vestigial traits that like they don't really need, but just haven't been selected out?
So, maybe probably. I think what we realized is we're not seeing a lot of what makes a herbivore in this analysis necessarily.
I see.
Just what makes them not a carnivore is coming up.
Right.
Like the way they become herbivorous is a little less predictable than how they stop being carnivorous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And this is just across a ton of species, as I recall from your work.
Yeah. So we're using a data set that's been publicly available for a while now from the Zoonomia Consortium, and they have this alignment of like 240 mammal species and another data set that has 400 odd species, which is a lot of species. We didn't look at all of those because you'd fry your computer trying to do that. But rest assured, we've used a lot. So yeah.
That's super exciting. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that. I'm excited to hear about the bears too next week, which is going to be great.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's kind of go to more of the sort of personal journey questions.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I'm gonna ask you, like, was there a time that you knew you wanted to be a scientist, or was this a sort of slow burn? Like, how did you end up in a PhD program?
So, I've listened to a lot of these episodes that you've done with other people, and they always say, my journey is kind of linear, and mine's not exactly linear, but it's not interesting. So
I doubt that.
Well, I'll try and make it interesting. That's so. In school, I didn't think I wanted to be a scientist. I actually wanted to be everything, and at one point, I did want to be a scientist, but I also wanted to be an actor, an artist, an architect, an astronaut. Lots of A's.
Yeah, you really didn't get on to the B's.
Well, I must have gone through them till I got to biologist.
Yeah.
At some point, I did want to be a scientist because I remember telling my grandmother, because I just found out from somewhere, it couldn't have been in school because it was a little too advanced to teach you in school, but I found out that people were thinking about how they were going to bring back the mammoth. And the idea was they were going to input an engineered embryo into an Asian elephant uterus and have it develop. And I thought that was really cool. It's like Jurassic Park, but with mammals.
Yeah.
I want to do that. So I told my grandmother, and she said, "Oh, that's nice. Okay, run off and play." And
how old were you at this point?
Like pretty young. So I don't know how I would have found out about it.
Yeah.
But it was cool.
Okay.
And so for like a week, that's what I wanted to be. And interestingly enough, there's now a biotech company that's trying to bring back the mammoth, and they had a job which I was perfect for, and I thought, how poetic would it be that I apply for this job and get it? They rejected me.
Oh man!
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I hope they're listening.
I hope so too, and I hope they have another job advertisement later. So yeah, at some point I wanted to be a scientist, but that dropped real quick because I just didn't know what I wanted to do. But I was good at science. I was also pretty creative, and I wanted to design video games for a long time. I took a special class in school where they sent me off to another college to learn how to do that. But the friends that I had and my parents were both of the opinion that science is the only way forward. So both of my parents are biologists.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. They work in the blood banks behind the scenes in hospitals for the National Health Service back in the UK. And they never really talked shop at home. I got to see where they worked when they would swap shifts and bring the kids to do the switcheroo. Yeah. And it looked really boring, and I didn't want to do that. And so we never talked about science or anything like that, but I always got the impression they thought anything else was like a dead end kind of job. So you have their input on what you should do. They didn't really like the idea that I took that video game design class, and in retrospect, it was actually a waste of time. And then I had a whole bunch of friends who really liked physics and science, and so they were the science geeks, and I was with them.
Okay.
So I decided, okay, I'll do something with biology because I like what I'm learning about animals and stuff. What can I do with that? And I fell into the trap that I think a lot of people fall into, in that it's only going to be like medicine or something like that. So in the UK, the education system is set up differently than here. You can go straight into medicine or dentistry or veterinary sciences straight from high school.
Right.
So I applied to do dentistry. I'd shadowed a bunch of dentists and realized I don't enjoy this, but I'm okay with putting my hand in someone's mouth and getting paid for it. So I'll do that.
That's the dental school brochure there.
Huh? I mean, that's probably why I never got accepted into any place, because that's all I could say. I didn't get accepted. It was super hard to get in. You needed two A's and a B in 3 STEM subjects, and I did 4 STEM subjects and didn't do as well. So the way it works is you can it's organized in the UK by the government how many places you can apply to go to university. You can apply to 5 places, and only 4 of them can be medicine or dentistry or veterinary sciences, so that you have a backup. And so I had one backup, which was biology at Cardiff University, and that's the only position I got. So I decided I'll do it. I couldn't do what I wanted to do, so if I can't do, I'll teach. And so I'll get this biology degree and become a teacher. And I did that. And I got accepted onto a teaching degree. And a week before that started, I realized I hate high schoolers. I got bullied relentlessly in high school, and the school I went to, the teachers got bullied too. I can't deal with that. And so I told them very politely, I'm sorry I've left it a week short notice, but I won't be coming to do the degree. And I spent the next year trying to find anything. And I found a job at a pet store, and I sold hamsters and snakes and stuff for a year.
Okay.
And in that time, I remembered that in my final year of undergrad, I had done a compulsory research project with a professor known as Frank Heiler, looking at brown bear genetics, brown bear microsatellites, population genetics, that kind of stuff. And so I said, Frank, I want to come back and do a master's degree, and I want to learn a little more bioinformatics. Uh-huh. And so after this year of working in the pet store, let's do that. And we did. And while I was working on that, Dr. Emily Puckett here at the University of Memphis advertised a position for a PhD student to look at the evolution of diet in bears. And so now you can maybe see where diet and bears come together.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've been looking at bears. Emily was interested in diet evolution. And it's a super interesting topic to study because specifically the polar bear and the brown bear only diverged relatively recently in the grand scheme of things, like 400,000 years ago. Yeah. The polar bear is less than 1 million years old, which I have no concept of time, but that seems like a short amount. And in that time, the polar bear has got a hugely divergent diet from the brown bear.
Absolutely.
It's carnivorous. It has all of these unique adaptations to live where it lives and eat what it lives. It mostly eats blubber. And so that's super interesting. But then if you look at the rest of bears, there's other interesting dietary adaptations as well. So you have the giant panda, which is a bamboo specialist, has this weird pseudo-thumb bone to grasp bamboo to eat it. There's the sloth bear, which a lot of people don't know about it, but it's this bear that lives on the Indian subcontinent. It's an insectivore, and it has this weird dentition and like a vaulted mouth palate. So the roof of its mouth is like a vaulted ceiling, and it enables it to suction feed termites and stuff.
Yeah.
So super interesting. There's only 8 bear species that are alive today, and yet they have all of this dietary variation. And so it's a really interesting topic. And so I applied to study evolution of diet in bears. But once I arrived, my interest in diet grew, and I started to look at diet evolution across mammals, and that's where the diet evolution stuff came. Yeah. So this is a really long roundabout way of saying, no, I didn't want to be a scientist except for like 5 seconds in front of my grandmother, and then the rest just happened.
I mean, I do think that there's I think there's a high degree of nonlinearity there, and I do think that also highlights, though, being open to these. So a couple things. This is going to be a bad pun, but I'm going to say it anyway. That like listening to your gut.
Yep.
You know that like if you know that this is not what you want to do, you know, like you knew it.
Yeah. I wish I'd known it more than a week before it was meant to start.
Yeah. But
I knew.
Still, like it's important that you listen to that, and then that takes you in these places where you can be open to the new exciting thing that comes along. You're working with somebody that's doing bear things, and then you see, oh, well, I'm looking around at other bear related stuff. And then you stumble across this thing that like really tickles your fancy, and all of a sudden you end up in Memphis, Tennessee.
My students are always like, why are you in Memphis? and I make them laugh by saying mistakes were made. But that's not true. I was really excited to work on the bear stuff, and I have worked on bear stuff since.
That's very interesting. And I think also, like, it's not, there's just not one path to get here, right? Like, I mean, we think about the people in grad school in our department, like a lot of people have, there's the straight from undergrad to grad school. There's like every variety of circuitous path.
And I think they all give you different life skills. It's analogous, but when I was in high school, I went back to my high school to shadow when I thought I was going to be a teacher. And all of my teachers told me, don't go straight into teaching, get some life experience, do something else first. And I think that also applies to graduate school. There are people that go straight from undergrad to graduate school, and that's great. They're very talented and capable, but the people that have had a circuitous route bring something else to the table.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's like anything, right? It's what works for you. And and again, listening to that gut, and if, I don't know, my gut was telling me that I didn't want to go to grad school right away. And I was like, okay, let's do other things. All right. So we talked a little bit about your paper and that you'd submitted it a couple times.
Yep.
And so you're familiar with the criticism that we get from the outside.
Intimately familiar.
Yes. Yeah, which is something that happens across grad school. The other side of that I like to talk about with people is the internal criticism, because we bring that along with us. Well, it depends on who you are, I suppose. But like, I bring it along with me in all sorts of things, like science and otherwise, and second guess decisions. And am I good enough to do this? And should I be doing this? Is this a good idea? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm wondering, how have you dealt with confronting that inner critic, and like, what have you learned about it in grad school, and how do you make it work for you, or how do you get it to shut up?
So I think it's a good question to ask me, because I'm earlier in my academic career than the other people you've had on your show, and they might have more experience dealing with that than I do. I don't have a lot of experience. I kind of let it rule me a lot of the time.
It can happen.
It doesn't mean it's a bad thing all the time.
Right.
I don't enjoy that it happens, but it motivates me to do the work that I need to get done. I think the big thing for me with my own internal critic is I compare myself to other people that I think I should be comparing myself to.
Right.
So I'm at a career stage I'm a graduate student. I'm comparing myself to other people who I think are at the same stage as me, and how successful have they been? I mentioned it's taken 6 years to get my first author publication. I'm very happy that it happened, and I understand why it took so long. But other people publish in their first or second year of graduate school, and then am I worse than them? No, they're doing a different project to me in a different field.
Yeah.
Asking a different question with a different set of circumstances. And you have to remember all of that and realize there's no point comparing yourself to that person. In our department, we do so many different things.
Yeah.
If I'm not on the same track as someone else, that doesn't mean that I'm doing a bad job. So.
Yeah, I think people will give advice of like, oh, just don't do that. Mm-hmm. Just don't compare yourself to other people.
Very hard to do that.
It's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that like I try to be a little forgiving of myself because like I'm gonna do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you get better at that second part that you said of like, okay, like I was just comparing myself to this person. I need to settle down a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what do you find is helpful for when you get into those loops?
So I'm very fortunate that I can kind of just vent to my wife, who was a graduate student here. She's now a postdoctoral researcher here, and so she understands exactly what I'm complaining about when I'm comparing myself to other people's successes.
Yeah.
And just hearing what I'm thinking and realizing a lot of what I'm saying to this other person is kind of stupid. It's not justified to think that way. And hearing it out loud, I think, is helpful sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, definitely having that, somebody that has that. I mean, my wife is a biologist, so like we're in a similar boat. Like we have somebody at our house that like understands these stresses and can be like, you're doing the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of give you that reality check.
I'm doing everything I need to. I'm working as much as I need to do, and I'm making progress. And so I should just be happy with what I'm achieving.
Yeah.
So. And
I think, also just being nice to yourself of like knowing that like, okay, I'm going to do this sometimes. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I guess that's kind of advicey, but let's explicitly talk about advice. So this, I ask people like to think of an undergraduate version of themselves, working in today's world of biology, of science, and what advice would you give that person? And I honestly think the same question makes sense to ask you. It's just that you have this it's a more recent perspective, right?
Yeah. And so I think probably the main advice I would give to a younger version of myself would be to explore your options a little more. So I told you I did science because people told me science should be what I should do. And then I fell into the trap of medicine and dentistry, which is not very imaginative because I didn't explore what else was out there. I ended up doing biology because I didn't get into that, and I didn't really think about what else I could do, except that I knew that you could teach. And then the science that I ended up doing happened because I had to take a compulsory research credit equivalent, and I enjoyed it. But what if I had stopped to look, and maybe I would be doing something completely different that I enjoy even more than what I'm doing right now? So I think that would be my advice. Take a second, explore things. Maybe don't rush into a PhD straight from a master's, or, maybe you could have worked 2 years in the pet store or something like that. Wait for something to come along and really explore things.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people feel pressure to rush into their careers. But as we've just talked about, you have some people that took a long time out before coming back to grad school. They know that's what they want to do because they've experienced the rest of the world.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's it's very difficult to try to find those other things because like you see the handful of things that you see and you're like, this is the universe of my choices.
Yep.
And it's hard to like make your brain be like, I'm just going to take an extra second. I'm going to just do an extra set of searches. I'm going to talk to an extra set of people.
It's hard to find the person to talk to.
It is.
To know those things. Because I wouldn't be able to search for something because I wouldn't know what to search for.
Yeah.
Like I only relatively recently discovered the world of biotech and government jobs and things like that. I didn't know those were options. I thought if you do a PhD, you have to be a professor. That's the rule. Which is not the rule. There are plenty of other options.
Absolutely. But there is, there's a difficulty that like I can give you, I think, pretty good advice on how to get my job. My advice on how to get a government job is not as good.
Yeah.
And how to get a biotech job, it's not as good.
Yep.
So I think it's important for both like people at your stage and at my stage to develop some contacts, that I can be like, you know what, why don't you talk to my buddy that like he does this thing where he works for a law firm now in intellectual property, and he got his degree in molecular biology or whatever.
I think that bounces into another piece of advice that I would have given undergrad or maybe early grad Matthew, is to just try and grow that network of people that you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of opportunities in life come from knowing what you know, but also who you know. You need to have both. You can't only know people and then be useless. You need to be good as well. And I think you limit yourself if you don't try and reach out to people and make those connections. Even if it's, we talked about just talking to someone over coffee. That's enough to maybe lead to some great career insight down the line.
And I feel like I've had conversations with lots of folks, with grad students before about this, that like the networking, like as a verb, that sounds kind of smarmy to me.
Yeah.
But when you think about like what actually it is like just emailing somebody who's going to be at the same conference as you that says, you do really cool stuff, can I pick your brain? And then, I mean, it's not about like, oh, I'm going to do this to forward my career. It's like, no, I like your science and I want to learn more about it. And you know some things that I don't know, and it would be just awesome to sit down and talk.
And I think that's how it's meant to work. It's meant to be organic. You're forming friendships potentially with people who do science, and that might help you in the future, or it might not. It's just nice to speak to these people because you like their science and hopefully they like yours.
Very worst case scenario, you know another person,
right? And
you had coffee.
Yeah. See, when I hear the phrase networking, or at least I used to think it meant just a crowd of people in like a mix, and you have to try and like break the ice with everybody, and it's super nerve-wracking, and don't do that.
And my vision of that situation, I'm also wearing a suit and tie, so I'm really extra uncomfortable in that situation.
Yeah. Which I don't think that kind of networking is actually successful anyway. So why put yourself in that situation?
Yeah. These I feel like these one-on-one like reach outs to somebody that you just think they do cool stuff, they're going to get back to you. Because they're going to be flattered that you said that you think that they do cool stuff. I
mean, I mentioned to you before we started recording, I reached out to somebody at a conference I went to, hey, come and look at my poster. They came and looked at my poster. They were very impressed. They then invited me to do a lab meeting presentation a couple of months later. And now in like a week and a half's time, I'm going for a job interview with them. So it really works out to do it and then do it organically. You know?
And it's not bad to do it, before, like, it's nice to knock on people's door before you're asking for something, where you're just like, hey, like, I just want to learn some cool stuff.
Yep.
And then, a year later, 6 months later, maybe one or the other of you knocks on the other's door and is like, hey, I have this opportunity. Are you interested?
You just have to make your existence known to people. One way people do that is social media, academic. Twitter, I guess it's X now.
Yeah.
And then there's Blue Sky, which I'm not on. I don't really do the social media thing, but that's another way of doing it if you don't want to do conferences and in-person kind of things.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad about those things.
Yeah.
They just have never like sung to me.
It would be a conscious effort for me to do a tweet. And so I don't do a tweet.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned kind of in passing, like you have these broad interests. And so I'd kind of like to ask, like, when you're not doing science, what are some of the things that you're doing?
I think there's a lot of things. I think part of my issue is I might not have a whole bunch of hobbies, but I have too many hobbies for the amount of time I have to do them.
Yeah.
So I really like video games. Always like video games. I mentioned I wanted to design them at one point. I really liked art as a kid before that got like pushed away and I have to do science.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get back into that now.
I hope you don't mind that I've seen some of your things because Julia showed me.
Yeah.
They're really quite good, man.
Thank you. Yeah, so I do the digital art. So growing up, my dad had a whole bunch of books of like fantasy art.
Okay.
And like the desktop wallpaper on our PC would be fantasy art, and there would be frames of fantasy art. And so I've grown up with that kind of stuff. And some people don't think it's very highbrow, but that's the stuff I like, and so I do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I draw fantasy stuff, muscular men and women doing stuff. Yeah.
Doing like fighting dragon
Yeah,
stuff, right? Okay, just
gosh.
to be clear.
Oh man, yeah, I should have. Whew. No. Yeah, I don't do that. I've lost my trail of thought now. Dungeons and Dragons. I'm a Dungeons and Dragons fiend. I love doing that, and I run a regular session for my little sister and brother back home, and that's how I keep in contact with them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never been like a D&D player, but I feel like maybe I should have been at some point.
I think
because
you absolutely should have been.
Because like maybe it's not too late. I don't know.
No, it isn't too late. And there are so many people. I've never played with any of them in the department, but I've heard them talk about D&D. They exist.
Okay.
So just find one of those secret conversations and you're in. Because I think you'd really like it, because it's like a lot of improv and maybe voice acting if you want to. If you're comfortable with that, you take on the role of a character.
I mean, I've listened to a couple podcasts of people doing like D&D campaigns, and I've found them surprisingly engaging.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I can see how people are into this.
There are people that you wouldn't expect to enjoy it that really enjoy it. And there's like celebrities that people think are cool that also do it. And so it used to be this thing that wasn't cool. And if you're not clued up on the way the world is now, you probably still think it's not cool, but it's definitely a cool thing to do now.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to find myself a game.
Do it.
So what else have I not asked you about that maybe you wish that I would have asked you about?
So I don't think I would have wished that you'd have asked me this, because I wouldn't really have a great answer besides what I've already said. But I think if you're asking somebody so early on in their academic career like me, I think a good question is, what's next for you?
Yeah.
Where do you go after this?
Yeah.
And in the short term, I have a job interview for a postdoc, and I really hope I get that. And then the answer would be I'm doing a postdoc. But after that, I don't know. Do I want to stay in academia afterwards? Will I get this postdoc? What do I do? I mentioned there's biotech jobs and there's government positions that I'd be interested in. I then also have the two-person problem. I already mentioned that my wife is a postdoctoral researcher. She's looking for her next position, and we have to balance both of those things. And so at some point I should probably speak to you about the two-person problem, because you've nailed it on the head.
Well, we've gone through phases. Like we've gone through multi-continent stages. We've gone bi-coastal. Yeah. We've been lucky lately that we've been, in the same place. Yeah. But yeah, it's we'll have a good chat about that.
Yeah, I think we need to.
But yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think you hit on something in there that is like, if I get this position, then I'll be doing a postdoc for, X number of years. I also think that, that is fine. That's like where, like, I mean, for like some job applications, you're going to write like a research plan of the next 5 years. And like, that's good. You should be thinking ahead. But like, realistically, I can't tell you what my research program is going to do in 10 years, because I don't know what I'm going to find out in 2 years. So it's like having more thought and, seeing the path more clearly for the near term, it just makes sense.
I think I can only look near. I can't look far away right now, and I never have been able to. I'm always just one step ahead of myself, and I think that's worked out so far. I understand that when you're trying to apply for like a faculty position, then you want to wow everyone with like, oh yeah, in 5 years, 10 years time, I'll be doing this. And whether that ends up working out, I don't know, but you still have to have it written down in the first place.
Yeah. And that's, part of doing a postdoc is going to be developing like thinking about those broader, like, all right, what is my, what, how does all the stuff that I've done and all the stuff that I'm thinking about, how does that all fit together?
Yeah.
And, for right now, like being like, there's cool stuff about this system that I want to find out.
Mm-hmm.
That's a perfectly reasonable thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And someone to pay you to do that.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, that's like going to grad school was kind of like, somebody's going to pay me for like at least 5 years to go out and chase critters.
Yep.
I think I'm going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'll figure out towards the end of that what I'm going to do next.
You got friends becoming medical doctors and bankers and lawyers, and okay, great, you got a lot of money, but I'm doing this cool thing.
Yeah, I'm out in the middle of a forest shouting at a tree. Like, I'm winning.
Yeah, I win. Yeah.
Well, Matthew Pollard, I think that's what I had for us today. Thank you so much for coming on. This
Not
has
a
been
problem. Pleasure.
A ton of fun, and I'm looking forward to referring to you as Dr. Pollard very soon.
I'm looking forward to you doing that too.
All right. Well, thanks so much, and we'll look forward to your talk next week.
Cool. Perfect.
Thanks so much again to my guest, Matthew Pollard. That is soon to be Dr. Matthew Pollard. He's giving his doctoral dissertation defense this Thursday, October 24th, 2024 at 4 p.m. in Ellington Hall. It's going to be a good show. I hope to see you all there, and thanks so much for tuning in.